why?
I went ahead and hit it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I totally forgot. And then so how and how did you get into it? Why?
I was more so a consumer before I was a creator. Originally, like one of the first podcasts that I ever listened to back in maybe 2012, 2013 was The Read with Crystal and Kid Fury. Some students should be maybe familiar with them, possibly. Love them. So we see some folks. That was my first two. That was so for a lot, especially for a lot of first time listeners that I've seen from Black folks, especially. The Read was really like kind of like their gateway. Some folks it was the Bodega Boys,
the Friend Zone,
or the Friend Zone. I know Friend Zone is a fave for you, Javon.
Yeah.
Trying to think, Jaden XD as well. Hey Shantae, how you doing?
My name Shantae.
Friend Zone, mine too. So we're seeing some folks that are familiar with some of these. And so those are really kind of my gateway, but I was really only listening to like really one genre. And that was more so like current events, folks talking about friends, like talking with friends, making jokes. And then I really started to like dive into the genre of podcasting and like really look at all the subgenres that were within it. I saw crime stories. Right. I saw people that listened to news. Like now I start my morning listening to NPR News podcast every morning because it's 15 minutes. It gives you 3 different stories that keeps you engaged. And it's something that you probably didn't know was going on. The New York Times does this as well. So many other publications do this. And so I really just kind of spread myself out and started listening to others. But I was on Twitter and I saw either an ad or something about an app called Anchor. In particular, this was around like 2016, maybe. And I was looking for a platform because I really didn't want to use YouTube. Like I like video, don't get me wrong, but I can't watch you while I'm driving. Just be personally, I'm not trying to die. Maybe I can watch you while I'm on my commute if I'm on a train, but I'd rather be able to listen to you. So for me, that became really a question of like how I can do that. And podcasting really became that vehicle. And so Anchor became the engine for that, the platform for that vehicle or whatnot. And so I started building around, what I really wanted to see. I was doing a book club at the time, and I wanted to virtually be able to discuss the same thing that we were doing. Like we had interviewed Michael Eric Dyson. That was our first interview. And I was like, well, let's do that, but in an audio format. And then I thought about, well, how are we going to reach these people? And Anchor offered so many abilities, like being able to contact those people on their phone. And it turned your phone, the thing that you use every day, into a recording device, which your phone has one of the best microphones in the business because people have to hear you, right? And so Anchor really like eliminated that barrier and that hesitation that I had about, I don't have any equipment, or, I can't do this yet. And it was like, yes, you can. Yeah, you can. You can do it right now. And like that being present really made me say, okay, let's go for this. And that's how really I got into it. And it started being really fun. I just didn't realize how easy it was going to be to interview authors. I tell folks all the time, the easiest interviews you will ever get as a podcaster is asking an author to talk about their book, because every author wants to talk about their book.
Yep.
As college students, y'all should, how many times y'all been to somebody's talk about their book if at school by now?
Shoot.
Too many times.
You lucky we ain't got no book to talk
you
about.
Lucky we ain't got.
You'll have the code right next to you on the syllabus.
But that's how I really got into it. I'll swing it over to Vaughn, and he can really talk about his creative process, because it's also extremely interesting how he got into it too as well.
Yeah. So mine came from the just the creative side of being in college. There was such a huge like influx of Black students into a PWI where me and Jace met at University of South Alabama. And the culture was so strong that we had, which y'all probably have like naturally, like fashion shows and like people really getting up on their social entrepreneurship. And for me, that was an opportunity to bring something to life. And I brought to life Melanews. And that idea came from like, there wasn't enough opportunities where Black students got to highlight their successes in academia than it was for us to have a story coming out from the university on like a police report or something that we've heard off of like what happened on Greek Row or anything like that. There was nothing to counteract that like information. So I thought of Melanews and put together like this 10-page magazine, hard copy, sold shirts. And that idea died kind of after like not really knowing what I wanted to do with it and not being like grounded in exactly what the next issue would look like, but handed out a whole bunch of physical magazines and sold t-shirts. But that idea never died. I went on the campaign trail 2019 after graduating with my master's, and I was driving between Orangeburg, South Carolina, and Moncks Corner, and sometimes Charleston. If you know that, that's like 2-hour drive that can, very well take a long time. And I was using podcast as my ability to like, let me zoom down this road to get to the campaign office, to go ahead and start my day, yada, yada. And the friend zone was that thing for me. And if you know the friend zone schedule, they release on Wednesday, I believe still. And with that, I realized on Wednesday, I was always looking forward to that. It was comforting. I was away from my family. The friend zone just felt so comfortable because it seemed like people that all represented me in 3 different, what is it? In 3 and 1. So it was really cool. That was like the blueprint of like the idea. And when I started to get out of campaigning and move into actual like steady employment, I realized that there was an opening on Thursday for podcasts. Like there was no big name podcast that dropped on Thursday. You might know one and open me up to it. But at that time, I was very much into the research of like, okay, where's the market open at, or where's there opportunities for us to come and step in and fill this void? And so with that, knowing that Thursday wasn't a drop, like people weren't dropping on that day, and realizing that I had this thing inside of me called Melanews that I wanted to rebirth, but I wanted to do it in like a safe place. The podcast came about. So that was my how, and my why is just simply because I'm very anti short content. Like I think the short content is really what's hurting us. And like the short content is what allows like us not to do our research enough or be prepared for conversations, or like allow things to just stay, I don't know, like allows us to just get by in 20 seconds. And it takes a lot more than just 20 seconds to get a topic across. And so I'm anti that. And I couldn't get with like some of these big tech giants like Facebook of like pushing, I don't know, I got some, Tyler the Creator says I declined the stage because it didn't match my ethos. That's how I felt. Like, like I had a lot of ethos.
That was a bar.
So I felt that in my core when it came to like really what I'm putting out. So that long form, the only place that I felt comfortable was podcasting. And podcasting, we were all just audio at first. But you grow, you gain, you understand, and then we started adding video, started making better decisions, and that's why we're here. That's the why and how, I guess.
And I also didn't get my why. I just wanted to do really dope interviews. Like I may say something that's controversial, but I'm gonna say it. I hate Breakfast Club interviews. I'm gonna tell y'all why.
He's been saying that for a long time.
I've been saying that for a really long time. I'm gonna tell y'all why I hate Breakfast Club interviews. I hate Breakfast Club interviews because in moments, this is the largest platform for Black folk as far as radio goes. And just to give you an idea, my family has a background in radio. For folks from Atlanta, if you are any folks familiar with V103 and DJ Greg Street, my uncle is DJ Greg Street. He's been in Atlanta for 25 years on the radio. And every single rapper that has come out of Atlanta since 1989, he has broke in the city of Atlanta. So in the heyday of the 2000s, any of that music that you listen to, he was there. And so my passion for radio really comes from him. I actually did radio originally before I did podcasting. At school, originally my show was called The Yard, where we covered everything that happened on, it was a double entendre for not just the yard as far as the college campus, but your backyard as far as what was happening in the city, because I saw that students didn't really have an avenue to where they knew what was happening on campus or off campus. And then my why for like my book club was that I wanted to be able to give Black people a space where they could celebrate African-American literature that was written by them for them. It was very much an HBCU mindset because I did not see that. When I would go to a bookstore, I would see all these books and I'd see this small section for African-American literature. And I was like, what if that small section was the entire store? And what if that was the entire conversation? What if we were able to uplift all of those authors in that space?
You're on mute.
Oh no, I'm sorry. That's my bad. I did that by mistake. I was trying to mute another student that I accidentally asked to unmute. I'm sorry. Oh God.
No, you're fine.
Okay, I apologize.
No, and so we were like, that was my why. And Javon very much, as you can tell by like what he talked about with his why behind Melanews and my why behind my book club, they sound very similar, right? Like they were really about the same business and doing the same thing. So when Javon came to me with the idea of let me get my headphones, I was immediately interested because it was the vehicle that I had been looking for, because I had been toying around with the idea of doing a second podcast because I was tired of doing one by myself. Because I'm not gonna lie to y'all, if y'all ask me about doing a solo podcast, I'm gonna tell y'all right now, it's a lot of work, especially if you want to produce it yourself. And it drained me. It was why I only did one episode a month, versus where now we do bi-weekly and sometimes even 3 a month. And so it took so much work to do that. And I was looking for a way to transition out of that. And so my why was, I wanted to give better interviews, but the Breakfast Club gave bad interviews and I hated watching them. I used to see them almost be able to pull something. There's something beautiful about somebody being able to pull something out of their interviewee, like that they never thought that they were going to talk about that day. Like I remember sitting down with Dr. Carol Anderson, who is like the foremost leader on voting rights. And I was sitting down talking to her and we were having a conversation. I was able to have her talk about something that she had never talked about like on Wax before, something that she was able to share about that had nothing to do with academia, nothing to do with voting rights, nothing to do with voter suppression, just her being raw, authentic, and real and herself. And there is something that I identify with being able to pull that out of people. Oprah did that. What's her name that started The View had that ability. I always forget her name. There have been so many great interviewers just over the years that I've seen that I've identified with. And Barbara Walters, thank you, Janice. Barbara Walters has that ability to do that. Tom Brokaw had that ability to do that. We see even now like Rachel Maddow or Alex Wagner, and many others that are just able to pull things out of politicians or celebrities or just pop culture icons that you're able not to pull out of most people in interviews. And I think that's what's important. Like, you want to talk about something that not only people have always wanted to hear, but you want to give them something that they never thought they'd hear before. I always say, give them something that they never thought they needed.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about podcasts, because you can listen to the interviews they did before and are able to do the research and get a good interview out of somebody. And sometimes the weight is off because you're only recording audio, or sometimes it's like on because it's video and audio. But podcasting is beautiful. Like, it's really a tool that I would recommend people tapping into. But should we go on to how this came about?
Yeah, and maybe how you came up with the name. Let me get
Okay.
my headphones, or and maybe run us through what putting together a typical show or episode kind of looks like, I guess. I think before this, Jace was showing me some of the equipment.
Yeah.
And which was very interesting to me because I haven't seen any of that before.
Yeah.
So
Jace, you want to handle equipment? I do the first part.
Yeah, I'm actually going to disappear for a second because I'm going to go grab my other mic to bring that out here, as well as my interface. It's in my closet. So I'll let Javon talk about the production real quick while I go grab that stuff, and I'll be back in 3 shakes.
Yeah, I'll be back after this break. But anyways, yeah, so if you listen to the podcast, you'll understand where that reference from. But yeah, so let me get my headphones. It's always something when you have to come up with a name or name. I don't know how parents do it, like name your child for the rest of the year. Like, it's the craziest thing. But like, to name a project that you have put so much thought into, it's probably the scariest, because it's like, damn, what if I don't I'm sorry, if I don't name it right, or if I don't say, if people don't get it, and you just got to move past all of that. The name doesn't matter, but it does matter. Okay, what really helps it is the branding behind it, and how you're able to like portray what you're saying by let me get my headphones. So let me get my headphones comes like, I really took the time to like clear distractions out, not like turn my phone off or anything like that, but really opened up my eyes to like what people were saying to me, past me in conversation, to see what I could really gather from a conversation. I mean, gather from the conversations that I knew I wanted to have on the podcast. And it was like a couple of times where I would call my friends and they would say like, hold on. What did you say? Let me get my headphones real quick. And that was the like, oh, let me get my headphones. I do have something that I want to tell people. So let me get my headphones. That's where we roll with it. And like, and it took, I mean, of course, like when you read it at first, it's like, let me get my headphones. Like, but once you allow it to get branded into like how you talk and what you're talking about, I think that's what made the name the name. And it has grown to be one of its own standing thing, not even like Javon's let me get my headphones, but like our let me get my headphones, where people really come to. Jace was talking about like Oprah breaking these big stories or anything, or Barbara Walters. But the way that I think about the podcast on the interview side is very much from a, like, if you know Double XL, the Double XL version of podcasts for like people that are breaking ground in health, social, society, business, lifestyle, and really being able to tell and etch in that new era of Black history. And I believe that in my core that that's what we're doing, and that's the aim that we're going at it from, of a way of like being the ones to tell the story of good people doing good work in climate, in healthcare, in society, in politics, in the local community garden, or like Black farmers in the South, or like teachers that are, like fundraising for things, and the business owner, the entrepreneur that has a hair butter, that grew their hair back, and all of these type of things. Those are the community stories that I want to tell and etch in some way, so that when we look back on where we come from, we don't really just see it as like oh, I got to start from scratch every single time. No, some people have done a little bit. This is how far they have gone. You go even farther. How we talk about period equity and discussions that, like, if you look at the landscape of what Twitter says that, or Instagram, hell, anywhere, that talks about like men podcasters, and it's like they're very much in themselves, or think they call females and all of those type of things. And we're really riding the ship of that, of like actually bringing good quality back to podcasting, with good interviews of people, again, like us, that are doing the work in these spaces and still getting the recognition. Goes all the way back to this Melon News that I was talking about, like bringing that in from like college or collegiate to like a real open space where people can be affected by the little change that happens in Washington, D.C., or the little change that happens in the small town of Tallahassee, or in the big town of Atlanta, or, the small town of Mobile, Alabama. Those type of things it doesn't matter. To me, you doing something good, you etching it in these areas that we're talking about. That's how we angle to our interviews. Now for for our show, a typical production, like Jay said, it's a heavy lift. Every 2 weeks, I applaud people that do weekly. I think the Friend Zone does weekly, but they have people backing them. They have sound people, engineers. We do all of that stuff in-house. What you see on Instagram is in-house. What you hear on Apple Podcasts is in-house. And those are all skills that probably I have gathered along the way, and just things that I have been inspired by, to recreate, or to, just bring into the lexicon of what it is that I'm using to create or speak about. And so for a regular episode, we break it down into 3 parts. We have Melon News, of course. We have What the Flick, and we have Pass the Aux Cord. Of course, you can kind of get your head around each one of those, and then we have a discussion. The discussion generally has been interviews lately. We have pivoted towards that, more towards the interview side, because it does get the engagement up on Instagram. It gets the people listening to the podcast. It gets the name more familiar. So that is the structure of them. And each section is probably about 15 to 30 minutes. We have a recap so that people know. And in between each section, we generally take like cuts of other interviews of our people talking, and put it in the middle, so that it's like, hey, I'm Javon, and you're listening to Let Me Get My Headphones, or hey, it's Jace, and you're listening to, almost like a radio show, if y'all know those like little like button pressing. And if you listen to the show, you could kind of get like a radio podcast feel from it. And I'm not shying away from that style. I think that is a niche in podcasting, to be able to do those things. But that is kind of how we have knit together Let Me Get My Headphones. And you can honestly think about it, in those sections that we have, like all of them are what you kind of use your headphones for. Like you listen to movies on the plane in your headphone, or like in the car, you're listening to music, or on the train, or like on the tram on campus, or whatever it is you're finding ways to get the news through your headphones. But those are all the ways that we put together the show and produce it bi-weekly.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the biggest thing that we always try to think about. I remember earlier this year when we were like doing "Let me get my headphones blank," because
Yes, let me
like
get
we
my
always try
headphones
to think of
because
like we
yeah,
think of ways around that, and like we think
yeah,
of very human ways, like when your girl got some tea. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like she
yeah,
just, she just saw her friend. She just saw her man. That's not her man, but that's her man. Walk through, the hallway. And he ain't
yep.
speak to her, and I gotta, girl, get your headphones because we on Facetime and it's gonna be on speakerphone. So it's about like he said, making people excited about wanting to listen to you, and I will also say like you guys are in a very particularly special position because you actually have an opportunity to learn a little bit about sound engineering, editing, and things of that nature because you're still an undergrad. Like that, there is an opportunity there, within your communications department if that's offered on campus, or I want to say Florida State, yeah, or maybe in at a later time. And also, one thing I wanted to bring up, Javon talked about something that was really important. And that was that not letting a dream die just because it doesn't work out in undergrad. Like, I know a lot of you have these really big ideas that you want to get off the ground immediately. And sometimes they don't get off the ground when you want them to. And it doesn't mean that just because they didn't get off the ground when you were 19, when you were 20, when you were 21. To give you an example, I was in the Army for 7 years. I went to junior college in 2011, and then I got deployed to Afghanistan. So, like, after one semester of school where I thought I was going to be a full-time student, my life changed, and I went overseas. Then I came back and I finished school, and I came back and I finished JUCO, and then I went to a 4-year university when I was 24 years old. 23, 24 years old. So I was doing undergrad a little bit different than people, and I was still trying to figure it out. Right. I wasn't your normal, undergrad student, being 24 years old. So like doing radio was a great way to expose me to other people. Cause even though I was going to a school in a town where I grew up, I didn't know anybody on campus. Right. Like, so I had to really put myself out there. So that communications department really became my home of a place where I created my show, and then being able to connect with my co-host and like create that special place that gave me, the pathway to where I am now, essentially. But to get to the equipment, so there's a couple of different things I wanted to show you. Right. So first thing I want to show you is an interface. So let's start with the fancy stuff first, because I know everybody likes fancy stuff. Right. So this is Focusrite. So Focusrite is a company that makes interfaces. So you have two type of mics. You got a USB mic, which I'm using right now.
Do the YouTube hand.
My bad. Let me do the
do the YouTube hand, makeup
yeah,
hand.
the YouTube hand, the YouTube influencer hand.
Yeah.
So this
make sure the lighting good.
Yes, yeah, the ring light, get it. So this is the Focusrite, you know what I'm saying? I got this for $200. And what it does is it gives me like a 2-in-2. A 2-in-2 is it gives me 2 plugs for XLR mic, so that I can run 2 mics in here. It has a monitor on here that's 48 watts. I can run this straight into my computer with a USB-C. And then this is the mic that it comes with. It's just your regular Scarlett Studio, right? All of this stuff comes with it, including headphones. So this was all in one. I got this at Best Buy back in 2021. And you could get that, and that's okay, but you're just starting off. Pockets are kind of light right now. It's a shrinkflation, as I like to call it.
They got them refund checks, I heard.
But the refund checks is gone, child. It's almost December.
It is
checks
December.
Been gone.
You're right. That's 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Too easy.
They gone. I said, Wednesday.
They is gone. I know that's right.
All right. So what I did when I first started off interviewing, I actually started off with lapel mics. Oh, homecoming
Take.
took it all. You know what? My homegirl just went home. It was her 10 year for homecoming. She said all her money gone. So these are just regular lapel mics right here, as you can see. I got these from Amazon for like $10, $15. And then what I did was I got a splitter like so, like a mic splitter that I could run into these so I could plug both of them up at the same time. And then I got at the time, because, you know, iPhones have the dongle because they don't have, you know, a phone jack. I hooked a dongle up to it and then, you know, ran from there. And this was back in 2016, 2017. So, you know, things were a little bit different. But this is still a way that people use on TikTok. A lot of those people use tiny mics. That's just a lapel mic. That's all like those tiny mics are, you know, essentially. And so if you want to start off like really small, this is a great place to start. You know, I mean, a good mic, like I also have a USB mic here as well. This is a Blue Yeti X. Blue Yeti
That's a
X,
very sensitive mic, though. Like
it is. USB mics are much more sensitive. And I will say this one ran me $150. It's not bad. I will say this is very moderately priced for an expensive mic. Reason I would say is because it has a lot of functions. Like this mic, you can use this one mic to interview one person. Essentially, like you could sit it between you on a table, and it has a setting where you can control the sides of where it's recording. So right now it's set for me to be able to talk just right here. So if I talk from the back of it, it wouldn't sound the same. See how it sounds different? But when I talk on it here, the sound is set for it to come right here, and it has several settings where I can switch it to where if I turn here, now it's set to an interview style. So if Javon was in front of me and I flip this over, now it sounds exactly the same way that it sounds on this side. But if I talk on the side of it, see how it sounds different? Or on this setting, it actually enables it so you can hear all the way around it. So what this is great for, if you're using a group setting, but you only got one mic and you have a small table, you can sit that mic right in the center of it. And no matter how I'm talking on this mic, you hear my voice exactly the same, right? So that's really useful. That's why I like Blue Yeti personally. I think the Blue Yeti X is like a really great device, and they've really improved over time. Like I got this mic back in 2020. It's already been 2 years. I know that there's already better mics out here than this. And it's a good, you know, first step mic if you're looking for something moderately priced, you know what I'm saying? Because it's Christmas time. And I would say USB is honestly also an easier route. I will say your sound will be better on an XLR every single time. Because it's coaxial cable. It's gonna sound better every single time. However, you have more control on the sound, but you have to set it to the way that you want it on that XLR, on that interface every single time you plug it up, right? Whereas it is with a USB, once you set it and you log in and the drivers are on your computer, you can forget it. You can, like, I have my mic. This mic right now is set to sound like 90s radio. That's why my voice sounds so crisp. Like in particular, it sounds so warm. Huh?
I said it sound crisp, you said.
It is crisp.
Okay.
Don't play me. Not in front of the kids.
I mean, it feels like a podcast with all these lights on.
Okay, that was the internet. That was the internet. We just had this. We had. Appreciate that, John. Appreciate that, John. But yeah, so those are like different functions, just to give you an example of like what a USB mic can do. Like Blue Yeti has its own interface that you can use beyond like your own mic settings on your computer, which once you hook the mic up, you can tailor it exactly to how you want your voice to sound. And so when I first started doing, let me get my headphones, I changed my mic sound from the way it sounded on there from my previous podcast, because then I was talking with 3 people versus talking with just one person. Get what I'm saying? So I had to change my mic settings in order to adjust to that, especially since we're talking from a virtual format as well. Even though we're talking from a virtual format, just so I have mic etiquette from that standpoint of like making sure that my settings are set in a way that don't overcrowd, like don't overpower what they're saying. So all of that matters. And then as far as also from the equipment part, it's not just hardware, it's software, right? So let's talk platforms, right? I know y'all want to talk, well, where do y'all record it? Because that's also a tool. That's also a tool. That's equipment as well. Because now we talked equipment. Now, where do you podcast? Right now, there's different places. There's so many places that you can podcast now. Twitter allows you to record. You got Clubhouse, you got Spotify Live, you got Anchor, you got Riverside. We primarily use Buzzsprout and Riverside. Buzzsprout is our actual platform that we use to launch. That controls our RSS feed. RSS feed is basically your unique URL code for your podcast, essentially. And so what it does is what Buzzsprout or what Anchor does is they take your RSS feed and then they produce different URLs for different podcasting platforms. So
they
that's
place
Apple.
it in the directories, the different directories.
In the different directories. So and by different directories, we mean Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Alt Podchaser. You can like literally just name them down the list. And so it puts it in all of those places for you automatically, because that's also extra work if you don't have that platform to do that. That is work that you have to do. Like some folks only put their podcast on a certain different amount of directories because that's where their audience, like I have friends, one of my favorite podcasts out of the DMV is the Brown Liquor Report. And they only put their podcast like on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. Like you can't find it like pretty much anywhere else, or if you could. And they're also on Patreon where they do like extra stuff as well, which we'll also talk about paid content and like paywalls and like stuff that you can do like that. So the reason why I really like Anchor is Anchor does give you the ability to monetize your content. I know you guys have probably maybe done a little background research on a couple of different platforms. Brianna, what platform do you use, Brianna?
So currently I use Instagram because mine started off, it wasn't supposed to be a podcast, but it turned into. So that's
right.
what.
Good for you.
Awesome. Yeah. Like I have a friend who also does that. My former co-host Braxton, he does a show called Shot TV and he does it exclusively on Instagram Live. But he also is now starting to record his content and then put it into podcast format. But there's different ways that you can do this. You have, like I said, you have Spotify Live now, which is formerly Green Room, Clubhouse, because audio social media is now like this new wave of content creation, right? And so it's giving people platforms where they can have unique conversations anywhere, right? And these can also be places that you can use to record your content. You know, like let's say that you build your following on Twitter, for example, right? And you use Twitter as your space where you can host your conversation. Let's say you have a conversation with, trying to think, who was just at y'all school for homecoming? Who performed at homecoming? Somebody put it in the chat. Rick Ross. So Rick Ross was at homecoming, right? So let's say that Brianna's got a lot of clout on campus. She got like 25,000 followers, maybe 30,000 followers. You know what I'm saying? And so she says that she's going to host a talk with Rick Ross during homecoming week. And you can come by virtually or have a talk with him before he shows up because he's not on campus yet or whatever. And like he gets to talk and she has this exclusive conversation and then she records that, right? So she records that. that whole entire conversation. She brings people up on stage to ask for interviews. She just made a whole podcast in that short little interview or whatever. The interview could have been 30, 45 minutes or whatever. She just did a whole podcast. And then what she can do is she takes that audio and then she can just pre-record like an intro and then say, hey guys, this is Briaunna Allison. And I had an interview with Rick Ross on Twitter. And we had a chance to talk about, his upcoming performance at FAMU's homecoming. He also had a chance to answer questions from different FAMU students, from freshmen to seniors to grad students to alumni. And you're going to hear that after this commercial. Boom, that's it. And it's done. You know what I'm saying? So it's that simple now to kind of, do this, to like now kind of execute interviews now because of so many platforms that you can host them on. One thing I like, back to Anchor and Spotify Live. So Spotify owns Anchor. And so what that means is one of the main directories that it's going to put it out on is Spotify, of course. And that's where they want you to drive, also where they ask you to drive your listeners to as well. But what I like as a platform that they do is, let's say that you host something on Spotify Live, for example. And if you host a room on Spotify Live, you're able to immediately record it from the first day that you get on the app. And then after you record it, it can direct you straight to Anchor to take that recording and then upload it on Anchor and then push it out. And if people see your podcast like profile on Spotify and you're recording a show live on Spotify Live, it'll notify them on that profile and they can click it and hop immediately into that room where you're recording. So if Briaunna is essentially doing that same interview, but doing it on Spotify Live versus doing it on Twitter, it's still the same format. You take the recording, you put it on your platform, that platform then spits it out to the directory, right? And so you can use these different avenues to do so. We use Riverside as our video playing format in our recording platform, but we use Buzzsprout as our actual vehicle to send our podcast out. It's just it's all in the same cycle, but it just matters and what's comfortable for you and how to do it. And once you have your path and how to do it, you just have to make it simple so that when you bring somebody on to interview, that they know how to, hop on. Like that's the easiest thing. Like, hey, you just got to hop on Twitter, or hey, you just got to hop on this app, or, just click this link and you're in there.
Let me add right here, because I think that that's a good point of like, when you start to include other people into your podcast process, it has to be simple. Like, no matter how much you focus on the sound quality, how much you focus on like the setup, all of that stuff doesn't matter unless you actually get the content and that person can get on without ease. We have switched over from Zoom based to Riverside, which allows for a little bit more like audio control and to cut out some of these like background noise, like a fan, or like cut out some of the like a cough that somebody might do, or able to cut clips. So Riverside is very good. However, like when you include other people, I think one of the tools that you really should be resourceful of, or like find a way to cultivate and really get them to sound like you, is when you reach out to people to ask them to be a part of your show. And that whole process, that whole exchange is a representation of the podcast brand. And Jace and Jasmine very much know like all of that stuff has to come through email for me, just because that's how my brain works. Like all of that stuff, like the emails, you should have like templates on like how you reach out to people, and a template on like the steps it takes for you to have a good recording process. We call it the let me get my headphones experiment. And those things are what sets you apart and makes them want to come back again. Every time somebody does an interview with us, they're like, oh, this was so fun. I had such a good time, because like, we're really just chilling. We're really just trying to promote you in the best light. But also you got to make sure you have headphones on, because the sound quality matters so much to me.
And they can't be wireless.
And they cannot be wireless. Yo. Like, you
we
can
have
do
a
wireless if you
non-negotiable
want
on
to,
that.
but like, we are non-negotiable on plug-in headphones, because we just realized the difference. I can control for some of that in production, but in post-production, but not all of it. And with that, you have to let your tools work for you. Some people cut their show in Anchor. I personally, I record the file, I download the MP3 file, and I go into GarageBand. That's another part of the tools that are very useful in post-production.
Using a DAW. I forgot to mention that as a tool as well. DAW is, let me actually, while you're talking, I'm going to get the acronym for DAW just so you guys have that.
So GarageBand, I had to make it make sense for me at my grown age, at my young grown age, of like buying a MacBook. Like, I wouldn't buy a MacBook Air, definitely buy a MacBook Pro if you're moving into a direction of like infrastructure.
Yes. And
just because you're running everything off of this computer. Like, if I turn this camera around right now that has a ring light around it, I'll put this camera in the chat too, like that there's normally use on like CNN or something like that. Really cheap camera though, and it comes with a mic. That's the mic that I'm using in it too. So, but those are the tools. Though GarageBand, I take the MP3 file out of Riverside. You can also get it from Zoom. I would recommend you if you start in a podcast right now, go ahead and use that free school Zoom link account and record. I don't know if they do that actually, because Zoom is expensive, but also like everything, if you could get anything free, cut off something free for a podcast, then do it. But also another part, a last one, and I'll let Jace jump in, is the show music. I think show music is so important when it comes to like the identity of people being able to recognize your show and the episodes you produce, which all of those things show up in our episode. So
yeah, speaking of music is why I run the music on the show. I am the music man. We didn't really talk a lot about our segments, but Javon kind of gave you the idea of what Melanews was. What the Flick is, our entertainment section where we talk about television. And then there's also Past the Aux Core where we talk about music primarily. And so about show music in particular, one of the reasons why I created the playlist and why, we're now at 18 volumes over the span of over a year now, is mainly music is another way to communicate with your audience. Because music transcends color, creed, religion, anything, you know what I'm saying? And everybody loves a good bop. And so like being able to give people, the current 14 days of like what I've listened to, but also being my co-host as well as our listeners being able to trust me enough to be able to curate a playlist. And they think it slaps. I'm very much humbled by.
Listen to it. Go listen to it.
We'll definitely post the links in the chat, as well as the link to the podcast as well. But that is another way to connect with your audience. Like if you want to talk about music, if you're inspired by music, one of the things that I did in my first radio show in the yard is like we never played well-known music. We only played B-sides. And the reasons why we did that is because we didn't just want to play B-sides like of albums, but we also wanted to play stuff that people wanted to hear. And I think that's the most important thing. So we got some few minutes left. So we wanted to get some questions in. So if you guys have some questions, could you please put them in the chat?
Yeah, if I could just if you could just hold off on the questions for
just hold off on the questions.
Yeah. We're gonna just hear from Briaunna for just about 10 minutes here, and then if you guys don't mind I mean, I know you guys are incredibly busy and all that, but if you don't mind just waiting about 10 minutes, and then we can do like a brief Q&A at the end. If
Cool.
that
Hey,
would be
I got an idea too. People can start putting your questions in the chat, but we're not going to start directing them to Jason, Javon, and Brianna until after Brianna talks. How about that?
okay. That sounds
That
awesome.
sounds wonderful.
Okay.
Okay, and so let's we're going to hear from Briaunna Allison. She is the creator of the podcast Revamped Youth, featured on Instagram. She is a student majoring in social work at Florida A&M University. She hails from Houston, Texas. Her ambitions include leading by example, giving back to community, and helping youth from all backgrounds. Fits right in here, I think. Go ahead, Brianna, take it away. Welcome.
Hello. I hope you all are doing well today. Well, tonight. Well, I'm going to talk about developing your podcast from a point of what you want to do before you actually start doing it. So as a student, I know things are very expensive right now. You have a lot of bills coming in from student fees and just life expenses, becoming an adult, whatever the case may be for you personally. So one of the first 3 things that I did when I started developing my podcast was I first determined the purpose for it. Why was I doing a podcast? Why did I want to do a podcast anyway? What qualities did I think I had that, or I knew I had, that would make me a good podcaster or make it interesting? And also I considered, did I want to do it for entertainment? Was it going to be to inform the public, or was it going to be a little bit of both? So just determining what you want to do personally and where you want it to go. And I believe that this is one of the most important steps to determine first, because it will keep you on the right track. Even like as you continue to do more and more episodes, you won't get lost in your podcast, become all over the place, and no one really understands why you're doing it. So you always want the purpose for your podcast to be evident and made known from the beginning. And that helps you create a firm foundation. The second thing is to think about what you want to discuss. Do you want to talk about recent news or political viewpoints or sports, or mix it all up in one? So just think about what appeals to you and what you can speak on and actually have a valid, well, everyone's opinions are valid, but what you can speak on and leave an impact and make people think about what you said and hopefully impact someone's life in a positive manner. So you want to determine your area of focus, and that helps you, like I said before, stay aligned with your purpose. So everything connects. So you determine your purpose and you determine what you're going to talk about. What you talk about should match your purpose. You shouldn't have, for example, say you want to inform people and then you just start talking about random things like trees, and that's not informing them at all. I know that's probably not a good example, but you don't want to mix it up and then everyone becomes confused and it's no longer interesting. That's how you lose your audience. So, and then you want to create a schedule, and keep a plan of operation. I cannot stress this enough. This has helped me with consistency and helped me maintain doing it and not lose interest for doing a podcast, because sometimes as things become harder, we can lose our passion for it. But if you have a schedule and you stay and stick to it, I believe that you will keep the passion for it. The passion will stay and it will be fun. It will not become a chore to do so. So think about how frequently you're going to upload. Will you do weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, however it's going to be, and make it made known whenever you do start it. You want to let your audience know, I'm going to upload every week, or I'm going to upload bi-weekly or monthly, because they will appreciate that and they're going to be looking out for it if they like the podcast. So you want to know for yourself, and so that you can inform your listeners how frequently you're going to upload. And then what days will you record? So determining what days you will record will help you be organized and manage doing a podcast and everything else in your life. I know that has helped me personally. I record on the weekend because I have school during the weekday. That keeps me organized. So figure out what works for your personal schedule and your life, because it will keep it fun. You want to make the podcast something you like to do. Please don't make it rough for yourself, because then it just becomes hard and you don't want to do it anymore. And then you could potentially make something that was great not be heard anymore. So, and then you want to consider special guests. Will you interview anyone, and how will you do so? So just thinking about how basically this refers to how you're going to do it from a general, you want to know something broad about it. So just the aspects of how, so the operations, that's basically what it is. You want to remain organized so that you do not lose yourself in the podcast. And for resources, in the era that we're in, technology is so available for everyone. You can find so many free things. There's applications that we call apps on the phone, on our phones, our computers. You have iMovie. You can do social media. Social media is somewhere that I started, where I still am. I'm on Instagram. My first video, I was surprised. It wound up hitting 500 people. That's a lot for if you're starting off with zero. So just think about what platform that you think you could generate the most people that you want to target. So you want to determine your target audience too. Like, me personally, when I started my podcast, I wanted to target youth and young believers, people. So my podcast is a Christian podcast, but the target was young believers, so that they could have we all could have somewhere to talk about things from a young perspective, and not the grandma and the parents' perspective, because it's different. So just determine what you want to do from the beginning. And your resources, you could use your headphones that you use for school. I know that Jason and Javon, that's your names, right? I pronounced it good? Okay. I know they've talked about having the plug-in headphones. So that could be something you consider. But if you're on a budget for the beginning, you can start off, just go on Amazon. Amazon is a great resource. You can do Prime. I know for students, you can do Prime for $2.99, and your things can come faster. So just look on the internet and see what's available, what type of equipment is available, and determine what equipment you would like to use. I know in the beginning, there will be obstacles. It's fun to make a podcast, but sometimes you're going to run into speed bumps. And I say speed bumps because speed bumps are meant for you to go over. They are not meant to stop you. So don't let any obstacles stop you from actually continuing on with your podcast, if that's something you really would like to do. So a lack of audience is something you can encounter when you're starting off. You may not hit 5,000. You may not have 1 million people listening to you from the beginning. But if you really enjoy doing it, let's continue to do the podcast, because something that you enjoy, people can tell that you enjoy it, and they will like to listen to you, because it's like, oh, okay, they're passionate about it, so I want to hear more. At least that's how I feel whenever I listen to a podcast. I look at, do this person really like to do it, or is it just a school assignment or just a chore? Because I don't want to listen to someone who do not want to be doing it themselves. I believe. So just think about, don't let the lack of audience discourage you. Remain consistent. I've learned that consistency will help grow. You never know who's listening, or it could be that one person that needed to hear whatever you were going to say. I know I've done an episode where it was 5 people, but all 5 of them was like, this is something I really needed to listen to this week. So you never know who you're going to impact. So remain consistent, even if you experience a lack of an audience. And that ties into fluctuating engagement. Sometimes it's going to be one person. Sometimes it might be 50. It might go up to 1,000. You never know. So it just fluctuates sometimes. So do not let that be a discouraging thing for you. Also, time management. Your one week may be busier than the other. It might catch you off guard and you're like, oh, I got to remember I have to do a podcast episode this week. So if you forget things easily, or if you have a lot going on in your life, but you still would like to do a podcast, just because you're busy, that doesn't mean you do not have to do one. I personally use the Remind app on my phone and the calendar mixed. I use both because I will forget, and I set alerts I know you can do the 30-minute alert, 2 days, 1 week, you can customize it. So find things that will work for you, like reminders, or I know some people use handwritten planners. If that works for you, do that. If you do the calendar on the wall, do what it takes for you to remember so that you can manage your time wisely, and you can use your time effectively. You might have technical difficulties. That is a real problem. Working on the internet, things are not perfect. The Wi-Fi might go out in your house, or the platform that you're using. I know with me using Instagram, sometimes my Wi-Fi disconnects and the microphone turns off when I'm not looking. That is one of the worst situations ever, but you do not let technical difficulties stop you. If anything, make it a joke. Make it something to laugh about. Like, I didn't even realize one time, the microphone cut off 3 times until someone told me, like, hey, we can't hear you anymore. I was like, wow, I've been talking, you guys can't hear me. So it turned into something that we laughed about. So never lose the fun part of it. So like I said, the obstacles that you face, look at them as speed bumps. Keep going. Don't let it slow you down permanently. And I would say the feedback also, when you're developing a podcast, in the beginning, you have to remember, like I said, remember your purpose. Let your purpose be your foundation. Never forget why you made this, because it will help you when feedback comes. And your feedback is going to vary. Not everyone is going to like what you do. Some people might challenge your opinion. Some people might say, oh, I disagree with you. But a disagreement doesn't have to be the end of it. It doesn't have to be something that's very detrimental to what you're doing. You can agree to disagree. Not everyone's going to like what you're saying. I've had positive and negative feedback. Now I say just filter what you want. And if it's something that's very negative that you believe that will damage your audience, or I know that on my podcast, I've had to delete some people's comments because it was horrible. But I keep constructive criticism, because you need to be able to show that you're okay with a disagreement. And it creates a moment of discussion and a conversation with your audience. And it allows them to see you from a personable aspect and not you as a teacher. You don't ever want to come off as a teacher unless that's your purpose. Unless you want to teach, then you can do that. But you want to come off in whatever manner that you decided you want to do. So if you're developing a podcast, remember to determine your purpose, think about what you're going to discuss, and do a broad general area so that you can continue to talk about it and you won't run out of topics. And if you feel like you're running out of topics, go back to your purpose. Because when you go back to your purpose, you can find something else to talk about. And you want clarity. You want clarity all the time. Create a schedule and a plan of operation. Go online, search up equipment, and just everything. Everything doesn't have to be expensive. Do not look at the major podcasts, because they have the tools and everything, and they've probably been doing it for years. You're just starting out. Give yourself grace. You can do it with the inexpensive products that you have right now in front of you, and you can progress as you go. Remember, obstacles are speed bumps. Don't let them stop you, and feedback will vary. So that was all I have to say. And I hope if you start a podcast, keep going.
Excellent. Thank you, Briaunna.
That was great.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really good, Briaunna. Me and Javon were literally just talking today about counting how many times we say like and during our podcast, because there it goes. You will find you will do things when you're recording that are quirks that you may not like. Remember that you can edit them in post if you mess up. And then also, it's not like, never get so frustrated because you say the wrong word or you need to start over because you're reading something. Like, it's going to get done, right? Take your time. You have all the time in the world. You don't have to rush your process. A big thing that Briaunna was about to touch on, and I just wanted to add on, about learning your audience when not a lot of people are listening. Beta test your podcast. I'm going to say that again. Beta test your podcast. What does that mean, Mr. Jace? What does that mean? Give it to the friends in your group chat. Don't let nobody else or people that you trust. It could be a professor, depending on what type of podcast it is. It could be an interview. It could be an educational podcast. It could be a news podcast. It could be a group podcast. But whatever it is, if you're doing it with a group of people, if you're doing it by yourself, have a group of people that you trust that listen to podcasts also. I think that's also important. Not just somebody who doesn't listen, not just a blind person, somebody who's actually a podcast listener. Have them listen. Blind listens are also really good too as well, but you want to get people who are used to listening to podcasts. But beta test before you. Don't think the first thing you make is what you're supposed to put out. Whoo, don't do that. Don't do that. Because you want to listen to yourself. You want
But
to
go
see
get to market. I differ with Jason is I get to market as quickly as possible. If you have made up your mind that you're gonna do a podcast, don't tarry on it.
Yeah,
Go
don't.
ahead and
I'm
do
not
it.
saying Terry. Yeah, I mean more so like do a couple of beta tests, a couple of different recordings on different topics that you see, or based on whatever that you're building your show around. And then when you feel like you're there, go launch. But don't just if you throw it out there and ain't nobody listen to it but you, it's,
They
might not.
still count that as a download on the
Yeah.
stats. So
It still counts as a download, but I like I said, you just want to before your finished product. So we did have a couple of questions, and the first one was from Janice. It says, I have a question about the time it takes to prepare an episode and about how long is the planning process, recording. I know that I know that this varies if you're dropping in earlier interviews, a la the Rick Ross example, and editing. Okay, so we will do a scenario real quick. Let's say that Christina is a famous musician and we want to interview her about her new book that she got coming out, talking about, the label that she had to fight to leave. And it sounds like really juicy. So what we do is, part of the process is also asking for an interview. So I would send a formal invite. I would find their representation. I would find Christina's representation. I would send her an invite. If she responds, I would also set a time out in advance, about 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, sometimes in advance. So I have time to prepare for said interview. Now, if it's something that's a quick turnaround, like Rick Ross coming out, Rick Ross may be coming a little bit earlier than like right before homecoming. So if you have time, then you can prepare for that if you let his people know. But sometimes it's just an on-the-fly interview. Sometimes you may not have time to edit depending on the setting and the atmosphere of how you recorded an interview. And maybe it just takes minimal editing where maybe you just have to edit out like some background noise or maybe cut a couple of dead pauses. But other than that, like the interview may be set as is, right? And so you only have to do a little bit. So preparing can take anywhere from 4 weeks out to it can be a day before, just depending like how much equipment you got. If you're just going out there with like a mic that hooks up to your phone and you're just going to do the interview like that may be all the stuff you need because you're just using, the recorder that's on your iPhone or your Android device. And then you're taking that audio, back home to put it on, GarageBand and or, whatever, digital audio workstation that you're using, and then edit from there. So it really just depends on the interview. And also depends, once again, what type of podcast that you're making. What type of podcast that you're making also determines the time that it takes to actually produce it and put it out. The podcast I did before Let Me Get My Headphones was monthly. That means it took me 30 days because we had to read a book for a whole month. That gave me time to think about questions around different chapters. And then by the time I got to 30 days and I did that interview, or maybe 27 days into it, the only thing that I really had to do was just, I'd already pre-recorded like the intro and stuff during that month, just about the book that I read so far. And then all I had to do was the interview. And that's the only part I had to add to that episode or any of those episodes. And so it really just depends on like what you're doing. Like it can be like I said, it can be an interview on the cuff. It can be one that you plan 4 weeks, 8 weeks out in advance. Follow-up question. The idea of repurposing interviews segments is good. Is the equipment the same for a podcaster who happens to be out in an event who catches people to an interview as it is for a person who is stationary? Sometimes it can be. It really just depends. Like Javon can talk about, like we've done all of our interviews. We have never done a podcast in person. Not one. Every single podcast recording that we have done has always been virtual. I live in Atlanta. Javon lives in Virginia. Jay lives in Virginia as well. So we actually haven't had a chance to sit down actually in front of each other and actually do a show together. Like Jay is my homegirl, but I've actually never met my co-host face to face. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes it can be in a situation where it's fully virtual. And yeah, obviously I wouldn't be using this mic outside because I need to plug this up to a computer and like all that other stuff. I mean, yeah, if I want to take all that equipment outside, yeah, but I probably need something a little bit more mobile and I guess aerodynamic. So I would more than likely use those lapel mics that I showed you guys earlier, because that's much more appropriate for like an outdoor setting where I can pin that to somebody. I have, a jack that I can plug it up to a phone, and then I can just use, like I said, the recorder that's on my iPhone, like that voice recorder. That is a great tool. Journalists use that, like when they're interviewing people, like I said, your phone has one of the best mics in the business. So you can use that literally to do a quick recording if you're doing like a 15 minute interview. A great example, have you guys ever seen that guy on TikTok who like walks around, he never shows his face, and he like asks people, what's the greatest pain that you've ever felt that isn't physical? And it's like a 5-minute conversation, or he'll ask somebody about when did you meet your first love or something like that. And it'll be 5-minute conversation or 2-minute conversation. Like I know Javon said he hates short media, but that's an easy way to like do an interview if you want to practice, like going around campus and just asking a simple question, recording it. You don't have to put it out, but it's just a way to test your interview skills, right? And your conversation skills and like how you're conversing with people like over time. And they be different people, whether they be professors, whether they be students, whether they just be people who are visiting campus. And you're just asking a simple question. And this is a way to kind of get yourself into that habit of interviewing on the fly, outside, on the go. After knowing topic of the podcast and its episodes, how do you regulate the flow of conversation so it doesn't get dry or boring? Great question. Javon is an expert at this, actually, because the way that he actually conducts our podcast, I wish that I could kind of share our show notes. But the one thing that we're big on is show notes. And what we use is, how many people y'all can use, either you can raise your hand on camera or you can raise your hand with the reaction. How many people use Google Docs? Because Google Docs is a godsend, especially when you are podcasting in a group, because then you can actually look at the structure in real time. So the way that we do our show, we have a rule where we have a deadline on the Sunday that is 3 days before our recording day. We record on Tuesday night. So that Sunday, which is 2 days prior, is where we have to put all of our talking points, what we're going to talk about that episode. We also have this thing, a wild card, where we say on that day or before that day, we can pull a wild card and say, I don't have nothing to talk about. I'll give my time to you to extend, your segment. So if you have let's say there's a big news story that Javon needs to cover, and I may not have anything to talk about and pass the aux cord. And so I'll say, I'll give 5 of my 15 minutes to Javon. And so we have a structured format. So now instead of him having 15 minutes to talk about the news, he's got 20 minutes to talk about Mela news. Jay still has her 15, 20 minutes for What the Flick. And now I'm down to 10 minutes because I don't have that much I may not have that much to talk about, and that's okay. I may just have one segment or one news or one music topic or one album I want to cover. Right. But we do this on that Sunday, because if we show up on Tuesday and saying I ain't got nothing, or if I say I want to change it, it's like, can't do that. You already committed to that. Like we have a non-negotiable about that for a reason. So it keeps everybody on track and on pace. And so our show moves like this. And so there's never a dull moment. We know even when we're interviewing somebody, we're looking real time. We have even on our show notes, we have it highlighted in different colors on what represents what. Like I'm orange on our show notes. So I know that anything in orange is for me. J is purple. So anything for J is in purple. Javon is another color. So we know structurally, and these notes always stay on there. So we only delete what we did previously. Before, what we used to do is just keep the pages. So we would just have pages of former show notes until we built a template that we really loved and that we were comfortable with, that worked for our show, where we're like, okay, we have these 3 segments. They work in this way. This is where our intro is. This is where we do our recap. This is where we shout out, what we call our big 3 for the 3 biggest cities that are listening to us. And then we go into Mela News, like boom, boom, boom. And that's how you really keep it from being so stagnant when you're in your interview. The reason why I say that we color coded is that nobody asks a question. Nobody asks 2 questions back to back in our interviews. It's very rare that happens. Part of the reason why is to keep the interview rotation, and it's also to keep your interviewee engaged, right? Because if I'm the only person talking to them, then it's going to lull them to sleep. But if I'm switching to Javon and he's asking about something from a totally different perspective, and then I'm passing it to Jay and she's asking, our guest, what TV shows are you watching? It's kind of the reason why we do news, entertainment, and music, is because we center a lot of our, some of our questions around that stuff, especially if we're interviewing musicians. I want to know, what are you listening to as a musician for inspiration? Or are you just listening to yourself? If you're an actor, we want to know what you're watching. What actors are you really inspired by? If you're a politician or if you're a public figure, we want to know like what news stories that really have your captivation. So that's how Mela News, What the Flick, and Pass the Aux Score still get incorporated into our interviews, and how they're still moving in the same format that they were moving in our 3 segments within our interview. So it's not slow. Did I explain that right, Javon?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Is that how you say it, or whatever? Yeah, the show notes are definitely, for a virtual group, is imperative to be maintained, and in a way, especially if it's more than one person. Like we put those rules into place as a collective. It wasn't just like my idea. It was just like, we have to hold ourselves accountable. It goes back to what Brianna was saying, like that consistency and schedule. Like those 2 things will set you apart from a lot of different podcasts, and will set you up for success in podcasting if you can maintain like consistency in a schedule. And this in the show notes is like quintessential to our success.
It's essentially like your Bible. Think of it like that. It's like your journal, because it's also all of your ideas.
Yep.
My brother is a filmmaker. He is a writer and executive producer for a show that you guys probably watch called P-Valley. And one thing that he taught me a long time ago is that you treat your idea like your baby. So you take care of it. And so essentially your show notes for your podcast is like all your recipes. You know how your mama sends you recipes, like passes down recipes,
Sweet potato pie recipe.
Yeah. So yes, you have to keep, like, that is essential, because that's how you set your norms, right? That's how you set your non-negotiables. If you have, and like your community guidelines, I like to think of them as community guidelines, right? For us, because for all 3 of us, we're a community. Like, we're 3 human beings. We have real jobs, right? We can't always be somewhere. And like Jay wasn't able to make it tonight, right? But I knew that one of us, one of them was going to be able to make it. And I really knew Javon was going to be able to really, bring it home because he is the brains behind the operation. So a lot of that stuff matters, and it's okay being overtime. We're fine. I want to say there was the next question. Is the research that goes into topics you guys choose a collaborative process, or does one person just bring relevant things to talk about? Like, how is a specific person designated to providing music? Okay, that's a good question. So I will give an example. So we have every single episode, the big topic after our 3 segments rotates. And so when we're not doing interviews, each host gets to pick what the big conversation is, right? And it goes in a cycle of 4. So it'll go Javon, Jay, myself, and then we have a segment where we call shoot the shit. Or we just, talk. We just gift the gab. We talk about something that's either, on our timelines, something popular. We may bring on a guest to just kick it with us, because we call like our interview setting the group chat. So when we bring people into the group chat, it's like a very lax place. So we want you to chill out. With that being said, there was a situation when the Facebook, the Facebook whistleblower happened earlier last year, right? This was like October or something of that. Yeah, last year, something like that. And I was in Mississippi. Yeah. And we were recording this episode, and Javon wasn't able to watch the deposition or whatever on C-SPAN or the news because he was at work. But I was on vacation and I was able to watch the whole thing. So I watched it, I took notes, everything. And so what we did was I let them know in advance, because it was my episode with my big segment. I let them know ahead of time, I'm going to be talking about the Facebook whistleblower. We're going to be breaking this down. This is how I'm going to do this. These are the notes. These are my sources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then Jay and Javon were able to look at that and know, okay, we know ahead of time, this is what Jason's going to be talking about. This is where we know where to chime in and ask questions. And they can also read that stuff ahead of time. Read those notes ahead of time. Now, if it's, we convene on Sunday really to put our notes in, and like we all kind of look individually. Sometimes we have a group FaceTime call or meet on, like we have a Discord channel that we have where we like to meet and have our meetings, or FaceTime, and we can kind of discuss what we're thinking about talking about. Like if there's a new album out, like when the Beyonce album dropped, I told them beforehand, I'm not dropping no playlist. The playlist is go listen to Beyonce. That's it. That's the assignment. And that's exactly what I said on the podcast. Same thing. It's kind of it's not, I won't say it's necessarily a collaborative process. I'll say more so it really just depends on what the topic is. For What the Flick, we pick a show with Jay that we're all watching collectively, that we're going to watch week to week. So we watch 3 of the shows that we watch have been Euphoria, P-Valley, and recently House of the Dragon that we just finished. So we all watch shows individually, like whether they be on Netflix, whether they be on Hulu, Disney Plus, what have you, that we're watching individually that we may chime in and talk about during her segment. But her segment is about the show mainly that she's watching and that we're watching also together as a group. And so she creates all of the talking points around that stuff. That's her baby. And we kind of like follow her lead on that and take her direction in that segment.
Yeah, I would just to add that one of the biggest parts of like collaborating in the podcast is just all being on the same accord, like where we want the end goal to be and what the end product is going to be. A lot of it, they allow me to like be the mastermind in the post room about it. But at the same time, like everybody has autonomy over their section. But those sections are like balanced between not being so reactive to everything that comes out of the media or everything that comes out in celebrity world. Like one of the biggest things for me is not chasing that rat race of like what the next last thing a president says or a public figure says or celebrity says, but to add kind of value or to predict what is going to happen based off of these chain reactions. So like some people do reactive news good. That was not one of my goals for let me get my headphones, like replaying what happened with the Migos or replaying what happened with Kanye. Those aren't the like the pieces of let me get my headphones. We're more so like breaking down bigger topics or breaking down things that get you out of that rat race. So
Yeah,
just
like
the last piece.
even in our last episode, for example, I talked about Kanye West, right? And the anti-Semitism stuff. But instead of focusing solely on Kanye West, what I really wanted to talk about was the through line between anti-Semitism, anti-Blackness, and how that roots back to white supremacy, because they're two sides of the same coin, which is kind of missing in the conversation that people are trying to have about what anti-Semitism is, what it looks like, because we're so consumed by this celebrity, right? And so we have to like, so in what Javon said, we don't try to rat race chase the story. Like if that's what your show is built on, do that, right? But you dictate what you really want to see in the content that you create, and the atmosphere that you create on your podcast. Like I said, you set your norms, you set your boundaries, you set your non-negotiables and your community guidelines, because it is a community that you are creating essentially with a podcast, right? We went from just having a few listeners to now branching out into doing stuff like Discord, where we're actually now going to meet a lot of our listeners virtually, in a Discord server where we can now post and talk about the TV shows that we're watching in real time, where Javon can now post news stories or podcasts or news podcast episodes that he finds interesting. For me, I can post all the new music that I'm listening to, but it also gives our listeners a chance to share the music that they're listening to. It gives them a chance to, put listener letters or drop questions for advice, so they don't have to send us emails now. It eliminates an email and turns an email into a DM. Or essentially just putting it on a chat box. Like I didn't mention Discord, but I know younger folks, especially if you're gamers, for students, are very aware of Discord and Twitch. Those are also platforms that you can use to platform to podcast as well, if you're because I know that's a video space that people use. But in conclusion, like that really kind of, because that was the last question, that really kind of concludes like really how we got started off. Like I saw some people that were really excited and said, they want to go, I want a podcast. Now I think Christy said it. And I say, go for it. Go for it. Like, I think this is a really good space. What I say is lead an alpha male podcast and all that other I'm tired of these quote unquote females doing this or dating podcasts. You don't have to talk about dating college young people. There are millions of topics that you can talk about that are not dating. They've been making, like, people make podcasts about taking care of their dog. And guess what? I listen to one because I have a dog. Like you can make one about anything. You can make one about your college experience. And particularly your college experience being a student at an HBCU in a time like this. And that's really important. So my charge to you guys is to go out there and make your own podcast and send it to us.
Yeah.
And go listen to ours. I mean, obviously, go listen to Let Me Get My Headphones.
Follow the
follow
Instagram
us,
account. We almost to a goal. So help us reach our goal.
Yeah, help us reach our goals. Follow us at Let Me Get My Headphones. It's really easy at Let Me Get My Headphones on Instagram. And on Twitter, it's LMGMHP.
MHP. You can reach out to us, email us. All that stuff is there. All of it's there. Reach out.
Also,
to us.
I'll Javon, post a link tree in the chat if you could, because the link tree can take you to our Discord. It can take you to any platform where you listen to where you consume podcasts as well. And our latest episode literally just dropped today, where we're talking about that we recorded on Tuesday. So if you like to listen to that one, yes, perfect timing indeed, Ms. Hudson. So yeah, if you would like to listen to that episode, it would be really great. Really cool conversation just about the history of anti-Semitism and anti-Blackness. I really also some really dope quotes from James Baldwin. Wow, like that was really good. I went back and finished that speech, Javon, after it's still really good. So yeah, please check out the podcast, leave a review. Please do. If you don't leave 5 stars, I'm gonna think you a hater. Not gonna lie to you. And like I said, go out there and make those podcasts. And when you got an idea, DM us on IG and bring us on for an interview, or maybe we want to bring you on for an interview so you can talk about your podcast. That is the last advice I will give you, is something that we are actually actively doing now and will in 2023. Go and interview other podcasters and ask to be on other people's podcasts. Why? Because you expose yourself. Not only do they get a chance to be exposed to your audience, but it's vice versa. So if you go on their show and people think, oh, I think Kaya's dope, I need to hear her more. And you could say, and you could be like, well, you can hear me on Kaya Speaks. We actually had a guest called, and her name was Kia Speaks. You can hear me at Kaya Speaks on Speaks on the mic. You know what I'm saying? And so it gives them a chance to cross-pollinate. And you guys can start that with each other, since you guys are working together. But if your university has a radio station, go visit them, talk to them about volunteering in there so you can get your hands on some sound equipment. You can take a radio production class on campus while you're still an undergrad. I highly advise it. So you can get a little bit more exposure to sound equipment and also recording and editing. It will really, really, really help. And maybe you can get on the radio early so you can start finding your voice and use that as a vehicle to eventually then move to a podcasting format. Because you can find your voice right there and your audience on campus, and those people can grow with you as you're there until you graduate, and then they can follow you once you got your own thing. You know what I'm saying? So make that happen. That's all I got.
Well, thank you, both of you, so much for devoting your time to this. This has been excellent. I really, everybody, I want just to give you guys a round of applause. I don't, either video or, a little icon, I guess. But it was wonderfully informative. Thank you so much. And I hope that everybody can make contact with you or gets inspired by this and follows your dream. So this has really been amazing. So I'm going to just close with thanking you guys, Javon Everett and Jace Barnes, and Briaunna Allison. She had another engagement she had to go to, so she has gone, but she also thanks you. She said she had a wonderful time, and so I'd also like to thank we're going to push Professor Price's segment to the podcast part 2. So we're just going to close out tonight with some thank yous. So again, thank you to Javon and Jace, Briaunna, and Brandon Vaughn for bringing you guys to us. And then
shout out to Brandon.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Brandon's one of my favorite people in the world. Like, truly, truly love him, and I was happy that he brought this to me. So I really enjoyed it. Please bring us back. We'd love to.
We'll do. We'll be contacting.
We can bring Jay next week. Yeah, we can bring Jay next time. We didn't have any women, our fellow Black women to like come talk about and give her perspective of being on the show.
That would be great. That would be excellent.
We'll
Thank you.
definitely be in touch about that.
Yeah.
For part 2, if you guys are interested.
Yeah, sure. We'd love to come back. Maybe we can talk about it. Maybe we can do a show virtually.
Ooh, that sounds really good.
Maybe we'll talk
Maybe.
about it.
All right. Did you finish the thank you, Steve, or?
No,
Okay.
like I said, I start with I just want to thank Professor Price for her footwork in this, and then and of course you, Dr. Hudson, and Dr. Kezia Henry, Dr. Lamar Garnes, and Dr. Kendra Mitchell for all their hard work in supporting the Lit Guild, as well as Dr. Yan and the Department of English and Modern Languages, Dean, as well as Dean Matthews in the College of Social Sciences, Arts, and Humanities, and all of you who have been here the whole time. We stayed above like 30 people the entire time.
Oh, really?
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
this was captivating.
Dang.
This
We
was
appreciate
captivating.
you.
This was
Hey,
this was a smashing success.
Some students be like, I'm gonna show up for 5 minutes so I get the participation and I'm out.
That's what I thought. I thought we were still.
I was
living up under
really
that code.
expecting
I
like
thought
that
it was
first
stacked.
15 minutes, and then there was gonna be a drop off, boy.
That's good. Y'all into it. That's really good. Hit us
Yeah, that
up
is
then
good.
if y'all want us
Yeah,
back.
we really do
like,
appreciate that.
Well, that's really nice.
Shout out to y'all,
Thank y'all.
to y'all professors not making y'all stay for extra credit.
Well.
Make sure y'all get that. Uh-oh.
my students are day school majors. They're in the journalism school, a lot of them anyway, so it works.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, Steve.
Yep.
You said everything?
That's everything. That's a wrap.
Thank you all so much for your time. I'm sure you enjoyed it. I loved it. We'll be posting this, a link to it in our Instagram for the department, and then it'll be on our YouTube page.
No extra
And we'll be in touch with you about part 2. Everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you later.
All right.
Good night. Thank you, guys.
Good night. Thank you so
Enjoyed
much.
you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, y'all. Hit us up.